Well, it's exactly 6 minutes past of the hour. The second hour or news hour begins right now. And of course, it's 1 year since the Kenya Kwanza government was elected. Now, interestingly, the William Ruto government has been given a grade C, but there are those people who believe he doesn't deserve, or the government doesn't deserve a grade C because of so many issues that we're talking about tonight. But what does the government think of its performance? Who better to talk about this than the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Mudavadi, who is joining us all the way from London. Good to see you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on News Hour. Perhaps the first place to call or to ask, the first question to ask tonight is, what are you doing in London?
Good evening, Ken. I hope you can hear me well.
Loud and clear.
Right. I'm out here on a government mission. We are partnering with the British government so that we can rejuvenate the Nairobi railway city. That is modernizing and regenerating the Nairobi railway station, and plus beginning to plan for the redevelopment of 435 acres, which are all around the railway system. It is hoped that once this project is through, there should be a footfall of about 30,000 people every day transiting through the Nairobi railway station. And therefore there's going to be a lot of economic activity, because this is not just about the commuting, but the whole economy that goes with a rejuvenated railway station. So this is going to be an important program, a project which has received the support of the British government and is also one of the priorities for the Kenya government.
Right, great. We'll hear more about this on your return. Let's get to the subject of the day. It's 1 year since your government, the Kenya Kwanza government, took over. There's a lot that has been said. I want your initial comments on the fact that the civil society and a number of them think that giving you a C+, giving the government a C+, is very generous. What do you think of that?
Well, I can tell you that we have done very well. I don't know what their marking scheme was, but I can tell you this, that as far as I'm concerned, if we look at it objectively, the government of Kenya in the first 1 year under the leadership of William Ruto has made tremendous strides based on the backdrop of inheriting a very difficult situation from the previous government. Let me just flag a couple of things. One, this government has been able to engage 56,000 teachers. That is extremely important for the future of our country. The budget that has been set aside to support education is over 630 billion Kenya shillings.
Okay.
Over and above that, there have been tremendous strides in the agricultural sector, where we are going to see a bumper harvest because of the intervention of this government.
PCS, I'd like to break down exactly what the government has done, but you also understand the parameters that were used to grade you, and I'll be talking about them. Now, before I go to the scorecard, let me get this out of the way, because a lot of people, when we said you're coming on air tonight, they wanted to know a couple of things. I'll try and get over and done with them. And the first thing is the issue of the Kenya Kwanza government looking like they've taken a whole year to seek for validation in terms of they won the election. It's been a back and forth for the whole year. From where you sit, has the government spent a year trying to get validated that indeed you won this election?
Not at all. We won the election last year, and those who were unable to believe that we had won had their day in court, in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court made its decision unanimously that Kenya had gone through a free and fair election. So it is not the Kenya Kwanza government that has been trying to validate itself. It is the opposition that has been living in denial.
Opposition living in denial. And for the last 1 year, they've kept you busy trying to answer that and affirm that indeed you won the election. Let's talk about also what is happening in the country that has given so much hope, the dialogue. Do you see anything coming out of the dialogue, PCS? Do you see something substantive with your experience in this country coming out of that dialogue?
I am always an optimist, and that is very important for us to be able to move forward as a nation. We must be positive when we want to get the country moving forward. So having dialogue is absolutely important. It is essential, and what is very important about this particular conversation is that now there's an understanding that this conversation shall be governed within the parliamentary confines, so that as they talk outside, whatever is agreed must be handled and approved or disapproved by the representatives of the people through Parliament. That is a very significant development.
All right. The back and forth about it also that is that we see going on in the political platforms. You think it's not undermining this process as much as you're optimistic?
As far as I'm concerned, nothing has gone out of turn as yet. It is quite normal when there's a conversation that people can express their views, but those views are not within the confines of those who are at the forefront to have the conversation. The agenda has been set, the agenda has been lined up, there are 5 issues to be discussed. The committee has also sought opinions in the interest of public participation from various stakeholders, and therefore we can put it this way. This is an occasion when you would say that sometimes if people are making noise on the side, it does not mean that the cow will not continue to have its water.
No, right. I have a question here from a gentleman called Davis, and this is a direct question. He says he has a question for you because the economic opportunities for the youth, women, and persons living with disabilities, the Kibaki government started access to government procurement opportunities, that's AGPO, and of course it reserved 30% for the government procurement to women, youth, and PWDs. Now this program has a great potential, he says. The question is, what is your office doing as a PCS to facilitate the absorption of AGPO?
We are going to enforce this particular item. And you will recall that because of the hard times, there had been a slowdown in some aspects of procurement across the board. But now that we have our first budget, I can tell you that my office and all other government departments are going to put their best foot forward so that our women, our young people, and people with disabilities can have their rightful share in accordance with the law.
The concern has always been the undeserving people getting these opportunities. I am not a youth, but perhaps I have a registered company where I have people in the bracket who I will use to get these opportunities. The people who are not in the bracket of persons with disability getting these opportunities, men getting these opportunities by registering organizations that look like, smell like they belong to women. So the question is about the people who are undeserving who get these opportunities. How are you going to ensure that to the rightful people?
Thanks. That's a very good question. You see, one of the things that the government of Kenya Kwanza is putting at the forefront is the whole aspect of digitization. Now, we want to be able to leverage on technology so that where people have been using such loopholes, we shall be able to nip them in the bud. Therefore, when we say we want to digitize our registration, have all this integrated, then it will be much easier to detect fraud when such people want to interfere with the rights of others.
Okay, we'll hold you to that, PCS. And finally, I need also to get this out of the way. The state of Mulembe Nation coming together is something that you've always wanted for a long time. It looks about a week or so ago when you joined hands with Moses Wetangula. The president has been making inroads in Western Kenya, done trips there, several of them. What is the status? Do you believe Mulembe Nation can be galvanized behind your government?
Yes, they can, and they will be. One thing I must state here is that we are seeing a greater sense of unity in that region. We, and when I say we, I'm talking specifically of myself, Musalia Mudavadi, and Moses Wetangula, made a deliberate decision that we wanted to change direction for the people of Western Kenya. They had been clamoring that they wanted to be in government. They had been in opposition for a long time. And we made a decision that has placed them in a better situation within the government. They are not in the opposition per se. Now, we want to leverage on that, and one of the classic examples I can give you is that immediately after the presidential visit to Western Kenya, where he was there for 1 week, even had a cabinet decision in cabinet meeting in Western Kenya, there has been a follow-up of a sugar conference for the region. And Mr. Ken, as we speak, there's a special sitting lined up for Parliament, I think tomorrow, or at least next week. And one of the key issues that they're discussing is the Treasury presentation of privatization, which focuses on the sugar industry. Now, that is going to make a big change, because for the first time, Parliament will now be making a decision to actually approve the write-off of debts that have been crippling the sugar industry. So 18 million people of the Western region, that is all the way from Migori up to Trans Nzoia, who have been affected by the collapse of the sugar industry, a lifeline is being put on the table. So that is an extremely significant development, and that is why there's every reason to support this government. And the function that was in Kakamega on the sugar industry was actually co-chaired by the governor of Kakamega, Fernandes Baraza. Irrespective of his political persuasion, we are saying that we want to work together and bring the economy of our people above the drowning level.
As an experienced politician PCS, 40-60, 50-50, 30-70, where do you see Mulembe Nation falling?
Where do I see Mulembe Nation falling, in what context?
50-50. Right now, Raila Odinga has majority of Western Kenya. You want to reduce that gap and eventually capture it. In the last election.
I think Ken, you see, I've been saying that there's people are refusing to see what is happening in the country. These are the guys who are living in self-denial. You can see very rapidly the legislators, irrespective of their party, are embracing cooperation and working with the government. So it is completely, it defeats logic to continue thinking that these people are on the other side.
Okay.
The reality is they are now working with the government. I can even give you the example of Honorable Kanchori in Kajiado. He has made a very categorical statement that elections are behind us. People must move on.
A statement that we hear from a lot of governors, and the constitution envisaged where the government, national government must work with the county government. But let me ask you as a final question on this. Is this, with your experience as a politician, an experienced politician who began when you are below 30 years old, is this good for democracy that everyone works with the government, or is it retrogressive, in your opinion as an experienced politician?
There is nothing wrong in working with the government. That does not take away your right to critique the government. There are two different issues.
Okay.
Working with the government is perfectly in order, and criticizing the government is another issue. Now, the Constitution says that the national government and the county government shall work because some of the programs they have are either joint or concurrent.
Okay.
The functions are there. And even then there's the Intergovernmental Relationship Act, which brings county governments' leadership together with the national government.
Okay.
And the chair of the Intergovernmental Relationship Committee is the president himself. So there's a legal framework already which envisages cooperation.
Okay. One of the areas that you're being graded upon, PCS, tonight is democracy. The civil society feel there's a clawback on democracy based on the fact that the president looks like he's out to get everyone to his government. So on democracy, your comment as we talk about 1 year in office, is there a clawback on democracy?
I think that is absolutely unfounded. Isn't it the same President Ruto who has written a memorandum to Parliament seeking to formalize and have a structured office of the opposition? It's him. The memorandum is in public domain. So how would he be saying that where he wants to institutionalize and have opposition becoming stronger and playing its role properly? How does that sit with the allegation that he's not for democracy?
Okay, so on democracy, I will ask you at the end of the interview to grade. I know you're a modest man, to give your very, very modest opinion and a grade to the government, how you think they performed out of 10. But let's go to the cost of living. This was your pet subject in the election, pre-election, yes, and during the election. And bottom up was an aspect that first, even you, was alien to you. Then eventually you came to understand it and joined that side of the team. The cost of living, how do you think your government has done in terms of ensuring that Kenyans can afford not only to get by, but actually to live?
This is a work in progress, Ken Mijigo. I say so because we know that we are going through a highly inflationary situation. But in spite of that, the government went out of its way to make sure, when we look at the staple food, which is maize, the government went out of its way to support production by ensuring that farmers get fertilizer at the rate of 3,500 shillings per bag, down from 7,000. All right? Now, this has seen tremendous increase in the capacity of the farmers. Prior to the Kenya Kwanza government, we had harvested as a nation 32 million bags of maize. with the intervention of the government, we are projecting that we'll harvest about 44 million bags of maize. And in terms of the acreage that farmers have put on food, they have increased it by 200,000 acres.
Okay.
And I can tell you right now, Gorogoro, the maize that is sold in Gorogoro, as you know it,
yes,
is down to about 90 shillings, coming down from about 200. Now, this is beginning to show, and even if you went to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, you will see that the inflation level is beginning to decline. Right.
We are running a story this evening, PCS, about North Rift farmers who are concerned that with El Nino and they were expecting a harvest, they may not be able to get the bumper harvest. And even if they do, because of rain not being able to dry their maize, we are staring at losses. Have you factored this in as you speak about possibility of getting 44 million bags, that the farmers from the Kenya's bread basket are already worried because of the rains? We might just go back to where we were.
We have factored it in, Ken Mijimbu. One of the things that I would like to make very clear is that even when we were in Kakamega for the cabinet session, it was made clear that the government is going to go out of its way to support farmers with dryers in the maize producing areas, and the government was going to support them by making sure that the cost of drying that grain will be subsidized.
Okay.
So our concentration is to the farmers. So there are going to be dryers, and that is a critical intervention. Equally, the government has already tasked the National Cereals and Produce Board through the Ministry of Agriculture to set aside some resources to be able to start the purchase of the offtake of some of the farmers' grain.
Okay. As you talk about the farmers, specific examples, PCS, on how your government is specifically putting money in the pockets of Kenyans. Forget about the farmers, which the government says they've done really well, and we're waiting to see the harvest. But specifically, would you say Kenyans are better in September of 2023 than they were in 2022 because the government of President William Ruto has put money in the pockets of Kenyans? And how is that?
The Kenyans are going through a difficult time, and we are going to systematically chip off that weight that is hurting the Kenyans. Ken, we must not forget or run away from the fact that the previous government had put us in serious debt. Now, that debt is coming to bite us because global factors like the Russian-Ukraine battle has exerted pressure on global supply chains, disrupting them. Equally, the bigger economies had raised interest rates, and this has impacted on the strength of the shilling, so that it has lost about 16% against the dollar. Now, this is not something that just comes overnight. Mm-hmm. What we are saying is that with time, the situation is going to be much better, and the interventions that the government is making are going to yield results.
Okay. I'm glad you're admitting that.
I've always said.
Yes.
I've always said that turning around the economy is not like instant coffee.
It can be.
Good.
You are talking about from 200 to 90 tonight, but my question is, if we can't even afford the 90 PCS, how is it a good thing for Kenyans? Just hoping, because what you're selling us tonight is hope that we shall be better tomorrow.
Ken, we are doing what governments do. And Kenya Kwanza took the position that one of the things that we want to do is to improve the economy. Can you tell me, Ken, of any government globally that is giving people free food? There's none. So we have to work towards making sure that the cost of living is moderated. And remember, we also have to strike a balance between those who produce the food and those who consume the food. They all build the economy. Production and consumption, the supply and the demand, all must work together for an economy to grow.
Okay. Away from the economy, the other aspect that they are scoring you tonight is on the cabinet, which, by the way, you're the supervisor. The 50% promise during campaigns, that 50% of President William Ruto, I know it's his discretion, but I want your remark on the fact that the 50% failed Kenyans, failed the Kenyan women, who are hoping that half of the cabinet will be women, half will be men.
All I can say is that there's a very good representation of women in cabinet. We look forward to a situation where, if it is not necessarily at the cabinet level, because we are still within the constitutional threshold, we have seen the president make deliberate efforts to have women in other significant portfolios, either as principal secretaries or even holding other critical positions in the government. And I'll tell you, for instance, in my ministry or in my office, my principal secretaries are two ladies, very good ladies. One, Aurelia Rono, and the other, Anne Wangombe. They are principal secretaries. They are the heads of the accounting officers in the office, and they're doing a wonderful job. So at no time should we imagine that the head of state does not support the women. We will see more. You watch this space.
We will see. That's a promise, same as the promise that was made before the current promise. You know, that's a promise. But away from the cabinet 50%, because that's the discretion of the president, let's talk about the other elephant in the room tonight. One of the senior government officials is quoted as saying corruption levels is of industrial scale in the country. This is one thing that the president promised to fight. And yet there's still so many aspects of corruption in the country. Every single day we hear of something that is happening. Your score on that, PCS?
The fight against corruption must be continuous, sustained, and we're not going to relent. All I can say is that this corruption must be fought within the framework of the law, and we are going to make sure that the institutions that have been earmarked to do their job will do so. As I said, there was a special sitting. One of the functions of that special sitting of Parliament was also to approve the appointment of the new Director of Public Prosecutions. We hope that once this is done, that office, in coordination with the other entities, will accelerate their war on corruption.
So fighting, PCS, I hear a lot of promises tonight, but let me ask you this. Today, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission had a session with senior media managers, Editors Guild and the rest. And one of the things that Talib Mubarak said is what has been a conversation that has been heard for a long time in the public space, that they should be given prosecutorial powers so that they are able to prosecute this case. Would you think that's the right way now that you're talking about non-relenting in the war against corruption, that EACC is empowered, given ability to prosecute?
As I said, once you're working within the edges of the law, then we can move forward. For your information, in a few days' time, I think on the 26th or sometime next week, I'll also be launching the strategic plan of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Okay.
And I will be able to talk a little more on some of these issues. But what is clear is that until the Constitution or the law is amended, because the law, it's the Constitution that says that matters prosecution vest with the Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, until you amend that aspect of the Constitution, it is the law.
This can come from the cabinet, can't it? I mean, it's not a critical area that needs a whole input. I mean, it could just be a resolve, maybe.
No, you'd have to amend the law. Because if you look at the Constitution now, you can see where the powers of prosecution are vested.
So you'll have to amend the law. So in the interim, we continue fighting corruption the old way we've been fighting corruption these years?
You see, one of the things that comes up is that if we also intensify and improve on the investigative capacity and also resource these institutions properly, we can be able to make serious inroads in the war against corruption. And I know very well that the Kenya Kwanza government is committed. And all I can tell you is that watch very carefully, and you will see in due course that those who think that corruption is a way of life will be shocked.
Okay. On the aspect of state capture, during the inauguration and subsequent addresses to the public and Kenyans, the government said that, for example, they will not be using the police to go against other people. They will not be using the police to go after people who don't support them. And we have seen a lot of instances that there is an element of state capture of government institutions. So it's also a concern that you are graded upon that as the president is awarded a C, this is another area that needs to be looked at. Do you think your government has done enough to let free institutions to work as per the law?
Yes, my brother, we have. Haven't you seen the challenge of the judiciary on matters to do with the finance bill as a critical example? There has been no government interference, and the government has had its challenges in court. We have seen the judiciary make decisions, even on the issue of the CAS, the chief administrative secretaries, and the government has not won that battle. So when we talk about state capture, you would have to be very specific as to what example can you really give that people have been harassed by this government. I'm waiting to hear from you.
When the president says you go to jail, he doesn't talk about prosecution. He says, when he talks about corruption, he says three things, and one of the things that he said is you go to jail. I mean, they are not being judged, but if you are corrupt, you go to jail. That is sort of giving an indirect order to the judiciary. Any person who is corrupt goes to jail.
Ken, if you said it, where would you want, if I were to ask you squarely, where would you want a corrupt person to go?
I believe there should be a process, and it doesn't have to come from the
Yes,
first arm of the government.
But what's the final destination of that person?
But the president making a pronouncement on the third arm of the government is where there's a problem.
No.
Yes.
The president never said that these people shall not go through court or shall not go through any due process. He simply put it mambo ni matatu. And I think even in the Bible there is something like that. I think it's in the book of Ezra. There are three issues. Either you go to prison, or you're banished, or at the same time maybe you are escorted to the other side. But even then,
yes,
even in that context, there was always due process. Even in those medieval times, there was due process.
Okay. Would you say there has been...
Right.
Proceed, please.
Sorry?
Proceed.
No. So I was just saying that unless there's any other specific example that you would say that would say that there's state capture. I don't think there's any state capture.
Okay.
We want institutions to run smoothly and in accordance with the law, and those institutions must be independent.
You almost have a supermajority in parliament. It looks like
yes,
parliament is an appendage of the executive. I mean, there is no single thing that I think the executive can ever not get through parliament. How does that work?
Is it undemocratic? When you have a majority in parliament, is it undemocratic?
It simply doesn't give leeway for parliament to do what parliamentarians to be elected. They were elected.
That is the whole essence of competitive politics. So when you have a majority, you use it to implement and push your policies.
Even if it disadvantages
and the opposition
common citizens,
has its role to critique it.
Even if it disadvantages
and if they can persuade
the common 190,
that the position of the majority party is not okay.
Okay.
We are human beings. We would also be ready to listen and see the logic from their side. So it's a question of whether they can prosecute their case effectively for us to see whether it makes sense.
Okay.
But for now, the majority belongs to Kenya Kwanza.
Okay.
As a coalition.
Even if your numbers, PCS,
and we have not broken any constitution provision.
Okay. My question is, even if the numbers in parliament, which is a democratic right of Kenya Kwanza to have as much as they have, even if it disadvantages Kenyans, you think it's still okay because it's not undemocratic? When there's massive outcry?
But Kenya Kwanza did not allocate itself those seats. Those seats were voted for. So the people of Kenya are the ones who decided the structure of parliament.
Okay. But you haven't answered my question. What happens? They were elected, but
which one is it?
What if the majority in parliament disadvantages Kenyans? What happens? Would you still say it's not a bad thing to have majority? You want specific example?
The majority at this point, we are pursuing policy, and policy issues are that we have to present a budget. We have to define how to raise revenues as a country. All right. The other government was there before, and they preferred to borrow.
Okay.
And we are trying to correct that situation. So this is where we would say that we are perfectly in order.
Okay.
And I want to tell Kenyans is that parliamentarians are reasonable people. And Kenya Kwanza parliamentarians are reasonable people. So we will listen to the views of the people, and we will also explain ourselves. Because, as I said, we were in a very deep hole.
Okay. I want to talk about the positives. You talked about the teachers, for example. There are a number of teachers you've been able to add. But you know, that's doing the right thing, so I don't want to major on it, but it's an achievement. So lastly on that, do you think the government has a regional representation in terms of positions and allocations of positions? Would you say that you're satisfied in the manner in which this government is set up as a prime cabinet secretary?
Yes, I am. The government is broad-based. The government is inclusive. And we are going to continue making sure that all Kenyans participate in the leadership of this country, regardless of how they may have voted or regardless of how the regions that are part of their heritage may have voted. We want everybody to be part and parcel of government because we are all taxpayers. Every Kenyan of the age of majority and is working is a taxpayer, and we must make sure that all Kenyans have their rightful position and share of this government.
About a year ago, PCS, when we were at the Bomas, I remember having a conversation with you, and one of the things you told me is that this government will deliver. Do you still hold that position? You told me before this government was constituted that from where you sit, you didn't even know, perhaps you knew which seat you'd occupy, but you told me this government will deliver to Kenyans. Do you still hold that position, critically thinking and looking through it?
I hold that position. We are on the right course. We have just finished 1 year, and I can tell you that we will not relent. We will pursue sound programs so that we can deliver for the Kenyan people. And the signs are there.
Okay.
It's not just about what we do here, but also what we do for the continent. And on that note, I want to also get Kenyans to appreciate that with the challenges that we are facing in terms of the climate challenges globally, Africa has gotten a major voice. Africa has become united in wanting to address the issues of climate change as a team, and that has been through the pivotal role of President William Ruto. So we are not just delivering for the Kenyan people, but we are also showing leadership for the continent.
Do we have money, PCS? Is there money in the country? Is there enough money circulating right now? There's a time it was said Kenya is broke.
You see, when we talk about money circulating, it has to be there. It has to be there in a manner that is supported by the economic activities of the day. All right? We don't want to create an inflationary process. We are not going to be an irresponsible government to print money. We are not going to print money. We are going to generate wealth. We are going to create jobs. And that is the right way to have resources circulating in the country. But we are not going to fall into the trap of printing money so that we can give the Kenyans the false impression that there is more money in circulation.
Okay.
Let us build the economy systematically.
So 33 billion shillings has not been printed to give that false impression. That's what you're telling us.
Sorry?
33 billion shillings has not been printed to give Kenyans that false impression that there's money circulating.
Why a figure of 33? Where are you coming from?
Well, we are media and we get to hear a lot of things that the government has printed additional money to make to give that impression that there's money in the economy. So that's what I'm asking clarification, that indeed there's never been printed money.
No, there's no printing of money. We are not in that business.
Okay. Finally, let's talk about the achievements that I can see. I mean, schools is a big thing. You've mentioned it. When you address Kenyans, because they're watching you tonight, apart from the number of teachers...
Sorry, I've lost you.
I hope you can still hear me.
Now I can hear you.
All right. In terms of achievements that you can table before Kenyans tonight, 1 year later, and tell us, I'll give you now a moment, tell us, apart from education sector, education reforms which are very progressive, what else would you table as PCS and say, Kenyans, this is what we've done for you in the last 1 year?
We have, I gave you the example of improved food production by making sure that farmers were able to obtain their fertilizer at better rates, subsidized rates. We have seen the introduction of the Hustler Fund, which has granted access to many Kenyans who borrow at very modest levels for them to have a higher turnover. And we have seen that about 7 million Kenyans have engaged in that borrowing, and they've borrowed almost 40 billion Kenya shillings.
Okay.
And believe you me, about 70% of them are repaying what they borrow religiously.
Okay.
That is a very good sign for the people of Kenya, and more so when you are looking at the medium to small scale enterprises.
Okay.
So these are very, very significant developments.
The ventures that the government put on hold, such as infrastructure development, until the economy stabilizes, are we seeing the government going back to this? Are we at a place that we can say now the government can begin to take projects?
What we are doing is that we want to prioritize and first of all complete the projects that had been committed to and had stalled, or contracts had been entered into and they had stalled. The prudent thing to do is to clean up those particular projects, have them properly funded, we complete them, and then we'll come to the new cycle of other projects.
All right. So you have been, I think we have a few minutes, so you have been given a C+. You believe that the government has done really well. How would you grade the government out of 10? You've been given a C, not a C+. A C. Yes. How would you grade the government out of 10? How much you've done?
The government has done very well, Ken.
Yes.
Okay. And we are going to do even more. And challenges will remain, but we shall face those challenges as a people, collectively and with resolution, so that we can get the country to move forward. So as far as I'm concerned, we are doing very well and we're on the right track.
All right. If you were to...
By the way, it's also important to acknowledge that with the intervention of the government, it has been able to negotiate a serious program with the World Bank and the IMF. These are very critical. These are actually votes of confidence that the government is pursuing proper fiscal policy. And over and above that, there's reform that is earmarked in the health sector. There are bills that are before Parliament. I would encourage Kenyans to reflect on those bills so that we can improve the issue around universal health care. These are very, very critical areas that we want to target. We want to target manufacturing so that we look at the value chains across the country. So we are focused on areas that are going to, so to speak, kuweka pesa mfukoni.
Okay.
For the people of Kenya. That is what we want to do.
Okay. And that was indeed part of my question. As I let you go, there's a question here on Twitter about the Kenyan shilling, the free fall that we see. One of the things that I remember the Deputy President said much earlier in the year when the government-to-government project was entered into for fuel was to stabilize the dollar, for example. Now, Kenyan shillings on a free fall today is about 144, a dollar for 144 shillings. Your take on that?
I did acknowledge that there are certain exogenous factors or extraneous factors that are affecting us as well. You remember I talked about the challenge of the Russia-Ukraine battle. I talked about the interest rates that have been adjusted in the bigger economies, and all those have had their impact on the shilling. Over and above that, remember, we have debt, international debt to pay, debt that the previous fellows put us in. As a sovereign debt, we have every obligation to make sure that we do settle those debts. We don't want to default, and therefore, you can now understand the pressure that has been on the shilling. But we are stabilizing it.
Okay, I get that as a promise. Thank you so much, Prime Cabinet Secretary. Unless you have your last remark. Yes, I have a last remark. Yes. I was watching you earlier, Ken Mijungu, as you are announcing that the Skyward aircraft has landed in Migori County. Yes.
Flight to Migori County.
Yes.
And you said that it's very good for your mom because she'll now be able to give you fresh
omena from the village. Yes.
Omena.
Yes.
Yes, please save some for me because when I come home, I would like to have some ugali and omena.
Kabisa, you'll have them. I'm going to talk to Mrs. Mijungu. Thank you so much, PCS.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Mudavadi speaking to us all the way from London where he's on official duty. He talks about locomotive and an agreement between the Kenyan government and the United Kingdom government. Let's wait for him to come back. We'll see what this is all about. Thank you so much for watching News Hour. We are at 11 o'clock on the dot. My name is Ken Mijungu. Damian Evans, earlier on sign language, and Musalia Mudavadi and the team. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. We continue with great conversations. Remember, Kenya Kwanza is marking 1 year. We have great discussions with the cabinet secretaries in all our programs. Have a good night. God bless, and see you next week, same place, same time, for another great conversation as I wait for my omena for my mom. Thank you. Good night.